Welcome to class. I believe other persons will be joining us shortly, but Mr. Courage, the CEO of Encourage Studio, he will be the one in charge of our class today. And I want us to pay close attention. Please keep your questions, if possible, towards the end of the class so we can learn a whole lot from him. Thank you so much, everyone.
Sure.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I want to confirm
Hello,
if
how
you
you doing?
hear me. You can hear me loud and clear, right?
Yes, we're getting you.
All right. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I hope we are doing well. Okay, good. So, just a quick one, just to know how many of us are photographers in the house. I just want to be sure the kind of people I'm talking to. Are we all photographers, or we are just general media persons in church? Do we have people who specialize in photography here? You can comment, or you can just indicate maybe with a thumbs up or something. I think I will know. Do we have photographers in a way? Okay, Edwin said in a way. All right, good. All right, Nelson said yeah. Nelson give a thumbs up. All right, awesome, awesome. Awesome. Okay, new photographer. So, for those of us that are photographers, I want to believe that I don't know. Do we have any beginner? Yeah, I just want to have an idea of the scope of people I'm talking to, so I'll know what best to say. All right. So I don't assume. All right. Grace, general media personnel. Okay. Precious said beginner. All right. Good. 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 Okay, Edwin says some of us are new to this thing. Okay, good. Because I want to be very sure I know the kind of people I'm talking to so that I'll be able to break things down the way you will understand. All right, all right. So can we get started? Because no time. If you're ready, say let's go, let's go. Write in the comment, let's go. I want that interaction to be sure that we're following. Let's go. Great, 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 great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mwigbeyogo Nosakhare Courage, and I'm a professional photographer. And I started photography about 8 years ago. I was in final year. I'll tell you a bit of my story. Please just hold on. My boy is crying. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Oh, yeah, take this. Go and meet grandma. So sorry for that. Okay, so my name is Courage Mugbeyogo. Like I said earlier on, I hold a master's. I hold BSc degree. Yeah, BSc, yes, BEng in engineering. I have NC in mathematics and physics. Then I have a couple of other, programs I've done. Then I'm professionally into photography full time. That's what I've been doing for the past 8 years. I started photography when I was in final year, and ever since then, I have been into photography fully. So I want to tell you guys a bit of my story, how I ventured into photography, because my story is very, very unique. I'm unlike other people who they started photography maybe because they didn't have any skill. They were thinking of what skill should I go into. I didn't start mine like that. My own photography started in 2017 when I attended a meeting. There was a meeting in Foursquare Church at Jebo, and it was for students, FSF students from different campuses. That meeting was tagged Ultimate Allegiance in 2017. And in that meeting, they invited Apostle Joshua Selman, and he was preaching. And while he was speaking in that meeting, he started talking about the different spheres of influence, how that God is going to be using people to take over the mountain of media, the mountain of family. He was just talking and teaching generally. But in that meeting, all of a sudden, my attention left him and what he was saying, and I was focused on the photographer. So all of a sudden, I didn't plan. I was just in that meeting listening to the sermon, and then my attention just left the photograph, left the preacher, and I was focused on the photographer that was just capturing the event. And that was it. As the meeting was about to come to an end, as people were rushing to go and meet the minister, I was rushing to go and see the photographer before he leaves. And then I met him and I spoke to him that I love the way he was taking pictures. What will it take to become a professional photographer? And then he told me that, yeah, photography is like a school. You need to go through training, this and that. So we're just talking. Meanwhile, I was in final year. And in that final year, I already saved some money because I did a lot of business. I was already saving money that I was going to use as my next level since I was about to leave school. So while I was talking to him, I already had some money. So I said, can you recommend a camera I can start with? He said I should buy a camcorder, like something very small. He was just trying to describe some things. And then, but that day, there was just this love for photography that just entered me that, it was not like I was prepared to be a photographer. It just happened. And when that guy was talking, I was trying to discourage me. I didn't listen. I went online, started looking at photographers in Nigeria. I never thought of becoming a photographer before that day. I never planned photography before that day. The passion for photography just came the way, you see people are imparted. They receive impartation in church. That's how I received my own impartation. And the minister didn't lay hands on me. It was just in a meeting where I was listening. And meanwhile, in that particular time, I was JCCF president of University of Benin. And as JCCF president, you shouldn't be thinking of you want to become a photographer, somebody that is popular in different fellowship. There's no fellowship you go to that they will not take you to the front seat. So you want to go into photography. It didn't make sense. But I didn't think of that. The thing just came like an impartation that I wanted to become a photographer. I was just looking for what will it take. So from that night, I started doing my research, started looking for information on what it would take to become a professional photographer. From there, I got to know about a photographer that was in Ilorin, because where we were it was at Ajebo, and it was not so far from Ibadan. So from there, I just took a bus to Ibadan. The person came from Ilorin. While the meeting was still going on, in terms of like 2 days later or thereabout, I went to meet this guy at Ibadan. I just saw him online. I said, I saw a camera I was going to sell. I said, please, I'm interested. I have some money. I can pay for this camera. So he came. We met at Ibadan. I told him, please, how can I operate this camera? Because I've never operated the camera before. So he explained and did some things. And then, I paid for the camera. And that guy became my first mentor. And online, every time on WhatsApp, I'm asking him questions. I was going to class with my camera. I was literally very, very engaged with my photography. I would go to class, go to night class. I would do all of that with my camera because I wanted, the passion just came, like nobody advised me. All right. So I'm saying this and I'm explaining it very clearly so that you understand that it is not something I planned for. And of course, God can do such things. Okay. So that's how I found myself in photography, and I've been doing it for about 8 years now. And most of my siblings are also into the same photography because I've been able to impart the skill onto so many persons around me, and we have a lot of people doing well in photography. All right, so that's just a little bit about my story. And then today I have close to about 50 something thousand followers on Instagram, and that happened because I have been promoting my work online. And in 2020, I created a picture that went viral, that it was featured, it went around. And that picture brought so many awareness to my page. And that was how I gained a lot of visibility on my page. All right, so I'm just giving you a little, backstory so that you know that I didn't just drop, I didn't just arrive at the top, I grew into it. All right, I grew into it. That's how life is. You don't just become, a big name, you grow into it. You grow into it. So, guys, just give me a moment. Let me just attend to these boys disturbing. My apologies. My apologies. It's just disturbing. The mom is not at home, so that's why it's just looking for attention. So let's go on. So, what are you going to learn today? So today we're not doing anything, practical. We're just going into more of the theoretical aspects just to prepare you. And in the next class, all right, we're going to have more practical, but the practical is going to be more on editing because we cannot really teach shooting online. Nothing like hands-on training. Okay. And another thing is when it comes to shooting, there's a lot of variable that comes into play. Number one variable that comes into play is the gears that we use. All right, we have different camera brands, different camera lenses, different lights, and we have different churches, different structures in our church and all that, different design, colors, lights, and the way the environment is. So there are a lot of variables that plays out when it comes to shooting. So it will be better with a physical training than online training. But for editing, the variables are less. All right, it's either you are using a computer or you're using a mobile phone. So those are the two options. And we have the softwares that can work on a mobile phone. We have the softwares that can work on a computer. So it will be easier to actually teach how to edit, than how to shoot. So I hope you understand. But today we're going to talk about shooting, but just in the theoretical aspects, just to prepare your mind on things that you can do better if you already handle a camera. And I believe you'll be able to learn a lot from that. So let's go on. So first, you need to understand church photography. Church photography is not like concerts. It's not like wedding. It's not like portraits. All right. Church photography is different in the sense that first, it is an atmosphere of worship. So you need to understand that as a photographer, you are not supposed to be a tool of distraction. So you have to carry out your work in a way that you are not causing a distraction because people came to worship God, not to look at you. All right, you're not supposed to steal their attention. That's why it is mandatory for every media personnel to wear dark colors, simply because you don't want to be reflecting light into people's eyes. You want to absorb light. You want to be, not visible. When you pass, people will not easily notice you. But when you are wearing bright colors, designs, things that are showing, at the end of the day, when you pass, it will distract people from the reason why they came to church. So I want us to be very clear on that. It is a place of worship. Because it's a place of worship, it's a unique environment that we must first of all make sure we are not tools of distraction. All right. Yes, our goal, our reason for coming to church or for being part of the workforce is because we want to serve. But you can do a service to God that can become like a sin to God. The book of Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 1 says, it says, guard your step when you come to the house of God. He said, be more ready to listen than to offer sacrifice that are of fools. I want to read it. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1. It said, guard your step when you come to the house of God. It said, be more inclined to listen. Because when it comes to the presence of God, it's not about you want to outperform God. Yes, you want to sacrifice and do something for God, but then you must also acknowledge that God loves sacrifice, but he loves it in certain ways. You cannot choose the way it should please God. God chooses the way he wants it. So if you understand God, you understand that you are supposed to reverence God, you're supposed to make sure that you are not, the devil does not take advantage of your service to distract other people in church. So that's the first thing you need to understand. All right, you don't need to. Then another thing I also want to state is that when it comes to church photography, like I said, it's not like wedding. In wedding, you are producing album. You are doing, you want to document the wedding, you want to make sure that you capture as much as possible. You want to capture everything, everybody's face to show. No, that's not the way we do it. Because with that, you'll be working so much. Just imagine how many services you have every month. So if in a service you are shooting 1,000 images, where are you going to post the 1,000 images? Because another event comes next month, the one you did last month is already expired, they don't need it anymore. So you need to make sure that you are going prepared and you have the kind of shots you want to take. There's something we teach. I have a photography school. There's something we teach when we teach about storytelling. I will teach what we call, I think we call it PACE. PACE, using the word PACE, P-A-C-E, as an acronym to be able to document, images very well. So P stands for portraits, A for area, C for close-up, and E for, I think, is that? No, A for action, E for environment. So P for portrait, A for action, C for close-up, E for environment, PACE. So what you need is, for example, you are capturing the lead singer that is, leading worship. You want a shot that shows the person's face, like a portrait. You want a shot that shows the action that the person is carrying out, which is singing. You want something that focuses more on the action. All right. Then you need something that shows maybe the environment. Where is this thing taking place? Those are the kind of shots that you put together and it tells the beautiful story. One picture cannot tell the entire story of a particular service. All right. So, but back to what I was saying. So you need to understand that you are not documenting a wedding. You are documenting a service that you will most likely have more sections from time to time. So therefore, you have to come prepared. You have to make sure that you are not taking too much pictures. You are taking what you need. All right. Quality over quantity. All right. Quality over quantity. And how you get good shots is by coming prepared. Most people don't come prepared before they come to shoot. All right. You're coming, you want to shoot, and then maybe you have a program, you're coming to shoot. You are not prepared on what kind of shot do you want to take. You're just coming to say, okay, as usual. You have to go and study, just like a professor will study before coming to class to teach. You have to study and prepare. And then people ask, how do you study? How do you study? Is by looking at what other people have done before. Because as a photographer, you have a third eye. Not the one that all these prophetic people are preaching on. Our third eye is the eye that we use to see the picture before the picture. That's what I mean. The photographic eye. All right. So the photographic eye is what will tell you that you can take from this angle and then you will get a very good shot. The photographic eye is what will tell you that why not include that light as a backlight to your shot. That is what the photographic eye will tell you, but it will not come without you feeding that your mind to be able to see those pictures before they take place. All right, to be able to take advantage of composition, angles, and all of that. You can only do that if you are prepared. And how do you prepare? Follow other photographers who do similar work and begin to prepare pictures that you need. So, okay, I love the way this person took the crowd shot. Then when you are going there to your service, you are looking for how to recreate similar crowd shots. What you are doing is that you are training your mind to be able to see well in any environment, and that way you become more creative. All right. So I just want you to understand that. Then another thing you should also understand when it comes to church photography is that unlike weddings where you have different couple, In church photography, most times we have the same environment, we have the same equipment, the same lighting every single day. So what will make your pictures look unique and look different all the time you're shooting? That's why you need to prepare. That's why you need to prepare. That's why you need to train your eyes by looking at what other people have done before. Don't just sit down and say, I want to create something somebody has never thought of. See, it will be easier for you to look at what somebody else has done before, look at another one, combine them together to make something unique, rather than sitting down to think from scratch. So in my academy, one of the assignments we give to our students is that you must, when we are going for an event, let's say we're going for a wedding, every person that's coming for that wedding must have at least 10 pictures. That is an inspiration of what they would like to take that day. I make it compulsory for every member of my team. The reason is because I am trying to make them train their mind to be able to see, to be able to prepare. Not that you will come and then you don't know what to do, and you're not shooting as if it's passport. No, you're not doing that. In order for you to be able to take creative shots, you need to learn from what other people have done before. So let me not overstress that point at time. And I believe that if you have questions, you just put them down and we'll have time to take the questions. So let's run along. All right. Please don't unmute yourself so that it doesn't disturb the flow. Okay, so let's go on. So that's that about the church environment. I just wanted to point those things out and let's proceed. Camera settings as refreshers. When it comes to exposure, camera, one of the things you need to understand is that there are 4 things that determines your exposure. Okay, what is exposure? For those people that don't know, exposure is how bright or how dark your image is. If the image is very bright, that has like a lot of bright areas with minimum dark areas, or that kind of thing, that everything is very overly bright, that kind of picture is termed overexposed. And an image that has a lot of dark areas that that are very dark, that you can barely see what is there, that image is tagged underexposed. All right, you're not supposed to shoot overexposed or underexposed. You're supposed to shoot well exposed shots. All right, a well exposed shot should have both bright and dark areas, but then your focus should be that if you're photographing somebody, how the person looks when you're looking at them with your eyes directly should be similar to how the person looks in your camera. So if the person is light skinned, the person should remain light skinned in your camera. If the person is dark skinned, the person should remain dark skinned in your camera. So try to achieve similar exposure that you can see with your bare eyes with that of what you capture in camera. So when you have that, that means you have gotten a well exposed shot. Now, an image can be divided into 5 based on luminosity. Luminosity means brightness levels. All right, and you can divide one image into 5. What are the 5 areas? Number 1, we have whites. Whites are bright areas that has little or no information. They are overly bright areas that has little or no information. Anytime you have a picture and there's a place that is very bright, that if you zoom in, you will not be able to see the texture or any details there. That area is tagged as whites. WHITES. All right. Then we also have something called highlights. Highlights are areas that are bright, but they still retain information. All right. For example, you see my forehead right now. You can see my skin, but it is bright. That is what highlights. Okay. Highlights are areas that are bright, but they still have details. They still have information. Okay. Then we'll go to the other side. We have what we call blacks. Blacks are areas that are overly dark, that has little or no information. Areas that are very dark, that when you zoom in, you can barely see if there's any texture, if there's any details there. All right, those are called what? Blacks. Then we also have what they call shadows. Shadows are areas that are dark, but they still have information. For example, under my neck right now is dark, but you can still see the skin texture to an extent. That is shadow. All right. Then the ones that do not fall between, that falls in between the shadow and the highlight, like areas like this part of my head right now, that is not dark, that is not bright, but it's just averagely exposed, they are called midtones. They are called midtones. All right. They are called midtones. What do you want now? Okay, wait. Sorry, I'm sorry. My boy is just disturbing. Okay, go and play with this. Take. Go and meet grandma. All right, so let's go on. So sorry, I'm at home, so and my wife is not around, so that's why. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye. Oh my God. Yeah, but if you help me. Oh yeah, I'm back. Go on, it's gone, Mr. Grandma. Guys, just give me a few minutes, like 2 minutes. Let me just quickly settle him. All right, so I think he wants to join the class, so let's go on. So, like I was saying, that you need to understand how exposure works. So, like I said, an image can be divided into 5 based on its luminosity. All right, we have the whites, the highlights, the blacks, the shadow, and the midtones. The midtones are areas that are neither bright or dark, but they contain a lot of information. Example, this side of my, my hair right now from this image, you can see that they are not very bright, they are not dark, they are just averagely exposed, and there are a lot of details. That's what we call midtones. So back to, what are the 4 things that determines your exposure? The first thing that determines how bright or how dark your image is called your light. The light that you have, whether it's your flash, whether it is the available light in the environment. The available light in the environment is called the ambient light. For example, light coming from the window, light coming from your bulb, light coming from those decoration lights and all of that. Those are what we call ambient light, because they make they make up the ambience of the environment. They make up what the environment carries as its its presence. Let me use the word presence, kind of. All right. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a mixture of lights. It's both, whether the light is coming from the window or coming from your bulb or anything. Any light that is available in the environment is called ambient lights. All right. And then most of us use flash, or you use continuous lights to shoot. Of course, that's also part of it. So if you're using your flashlight, but anything that contributes luminance to your scene is also a factor that will determine whether your image will be well exposed or underexposed or overexposed. So the first factor that determines exposure is light. Now, how does light affect exposure? Number 1, light affects exposure based on its intensity. What do I mean? The higher the power of the light, the more exposed the image will be. The lower the power of the light, the less exposed the image will be. Okay, so that's the first way light affects exposure. The second way light affects exposure is proximity. The closer your subject is to the light, the brighter your image will be. The farther your image is from the light, the darker your image will be. All right, so that is the way light affects exposure. Then the second way, the second thing that controls or that affects your exposure is called the aperture. What is aperture? Sorry, let's see. What is aperture? Aperture is how wide your lens opens to receive light. Okay, so your lens all right, has some blades inside it called the aperture blade, and that aperture blade can open wide or close to be very small. So when that aperture blade closes and become very small, you have little light that comes in. But when the aperture blade opens very wide, you have more light that comes in. All right, and that is what the aperture is about. So if it opens wide, it is termed a wide aperture. More light is going to enter your camera, and therefore you're going to have a brighter image. But when the aperture is small or narrow, then you have what? Less light coming into the camera, therefore it's going to result to a darker image. I hope we're following. I hope I'm not throwing anybody off balance. All right, please stop. So good. Rollins is following. All right, so that's how the aperture affects exposure. Nelson, thanks. Okay, that's how the aperture affects exposure. But then aperture is not the only thing that controls exposure, because aperture also has its own limits. You can get to the widest aperture, or you can even get to the narrowest aperture. What if your image is still not well exposed? All right, there are some cameras that have, up to what we call f1.8. Aperture is recorded in f-stops. So we have f1.8, we have f1.2, we have, f2, f8, like that. There are different aperture values, numbers. All right, so what you just do is, on your camera, you just check where you can control the aperture. The one that starts with F on the screen is what the aperture is. So you just check and you see the different options that are available. Okay, when the f-stop is looking smaller, in terms of when you see f2.5, f1.8, what it means is that you have a very wide aperture. And what does wide aperture result to? A wide aperture will result to a brighter image. All right. So, but when you have an f-stop that is of a higher number, let's say f8 or f22, f16, what that will result to is that it's going to result to what we call a smaller aperture, and that smaller aperture will eventually make your image darker. So I said aperture is how wide the lens opens to receive light. If the aperture opens very wide, more light will enter. Just imagine you're in a dark room and you open the window a little, more light will come. The wider you open the window, the more light that will enter your room. But if you open the window just a little bit, what is that? That's a small aperture. When you open the window very wide, that's what we call a wide aperture. So now, the aperture is a feature that comes with your lens, not your camera. So it means that if you want a wide aperture, you need to choose a lens that has a wide aperture, not a camera that has a wide aperture, because the camera has nothing to do with aperture. The camera is what controls the aperture, but then the camera is not what has the aperture blade. The aperture blade is present in the lens. So that's why there are some lenses that are more expensive than others. Okay, because of the aperture. You might see that in the market we have three types of 85mm, for example. We have 85mm 1.8, we have 85mm 1.4, we have 85mm 1.2, and they are not the same price. The reason why one is more expensive than the other is because of the wider aperture, because it can receive more light. But then there's something else that happens when you are using wide aperture all the time. When you are using wide aperture all the time, number one thing you will notice is that your images are going to be very soft. When I mean soft, they will not be very sharp. They will look as if they want to be blur, but they are not blur like that. So, but they are not just sharp. You cannot zoom in and just be seeing all the skin textures easily. All right, except you are using a very high, quality glass, like quality lens. That even though you are using a wide aperture, the areas that are sharp will still be very, very sharp. But then for a regular lens like a 50mm 1.8, you might shoot 1.8 f1.8 and you realize that the image is not tack sharp. Why? Because the wider the aperture, the softer your image is going to be. So if your aim is to have a very tack sharp image, you need to shoot a smaller aperture. So, for example, f8, f7.1, f9, f10, f13, f4, f5.6. Those are apertures that will give you sharper images compared to f1.4, f1.8. Then that's not the only thing that happens when you shoot a wide aperture. Another thing that happens when you shoot a wide aperture is that you're going to have what we call depth of field. For example, you see that this is my video right now. You see that my curtain behind me is blurred out. Why is it blurred out? It's blurred out because this my camera is trying to imitate what a wide aperture will do. A wide aperture will always defocus your background. All right, a wide aperture will always defocus your background. It will put your image in focus and anything behind it will become blurred. Our eyes does like that. If you bring your finger close to your eye and you focus on your eye, you will realize that anything behind you focus on your finger, anything behind your finger becomes blurred. That is what happens when you shoot a wide aperture. Anything behind becomes blurry. So if you're going to shoot a group photograph, for example, don't shoot a wide aperture. Else, anybody standing behind any area you put your focus on, anybody standing behind them is going to be out of focus. They're going to be defocused. They're going to be blurred. So if you're shooting a group photograph, it is advisable to use smaller aperture so that you can have sharper images. You can have what we call a high depth of field. Depth of field, all right, because when you look at a photograph has three elements. It has the foreground, anything that is in front. It has the subject, and it has the background, anything that is behind. All right. So now, these elements you have in a frame or in a picture, how they appear in the final result is what they call the depth of field. So if only a little area or just a little area of your image is sharp, that is called what we call shallow depth of field. Let's take an example. I am here, somebody is in front and somebody is behind me. If you focus on me and take a picture, I am sharp, the person in front is blur, the person behind is blur. That is what we call a shallow depth of field. But if you take a picture, the person in front of me is sharp, but meanwhile you focused on me, but the person in front of me is sharp, the person behind me is sharp, that is what we call a high depth of field. And a high depth of field simply means that, please stop. A high depth of field means that a lot of the area of your image is sharp, is in focus. So people that want to use a high depth of field will be people who want to take group photographs, for example. But if, for example, you want to take, maybe people are worshiping like this, and they raise their, maybe somebody is raising their head and they are worshiping. Maybe you are trying to take the shot from the back, and from the back of the person, there's light on the stage, and you take what we call a silhouette shot where the person is dark, but the background, will have light. All right, that kind of shot, if you want to take that shot, because you are focusing on the person, all right, against a bright background, you want this person to be sharp and the background to be out of focus or be defocused. So in that situation, you can use a stop. You can use a wide aperture. All right. So, but if, for example, you are trying to take a group photograph, maybe graduation ceremony, they are graduating from the Bible school, you want to take a group photograph, you don't have any business with a wide aperture. All right. If you don't have enough lights, there are other elements that can control your exposure, and you don't have to use your aperture. All right, so let's move on to the next thing that controls exposure. The next factor that controls exposure is what we call the shutter speed. Now, this one is, has to do with your camera. Now, when you put your lens in front of your camera, the place where your lens connects to your camera, that hole where you can lock your lens into, if you look in there, there are two key things you will see. If you are using a mirrorless camera, two key things. If you are using a DSLR are the old, they're not so old. Like the the most popular, digital cameras that have interchangeable lenses. They are called DSLR. This you can go. Thank you. God bless you. Go on, Miss Grammar. Go on, Miss Grammar. Go on, Miss Grammar. Please go on, Miss Grammar. Thank you. Go. Please, guys, just let me settle him. Please hold on, guys.
Good evening, family. How are we doing? I believe we're all learning. So far, so good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. By God's
Yes, sir.
grace, the recording, we are going to make the recording. We are recording the class. It's going to be available on the YouTube channel.
So, guys,
Continue.
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry that maybe I would just have stayed back in the office to do this before coming home. I didn't know I would come and meet a lot of stress. So let's go on. Can we proceed? So are you guys following? Is the class interesting? Are you learning? Let me be sure. I want to get feedbacks. Are you learning? Just write in the comments or thumbs up. Okay, good. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Great. So let's proceed. Awesome. Beautiful. All right. So now let's go on. So I said the third element that controls your exposure is called the third element that controls your exposure is called the shutter speed. All right. So now what's the shutter speed? The shutter speed is actually what how will I call it? Please hold on. This guy is back again. All right, so let's go on. So the shutter speed is like, I don't know. Let me explain like this. Maybe most of you will follow like this. If you watch behind the scenes of movies, there's something they use that they will say action, and then they will say cut. That thing they use is the way the shutter speed works. The shutter speed is what tells the sensor action, cut. So that's what the shutter speed does. So the shutter speed, there's something called a shutter blade, or the shutter blade in the camera. It's always in front of, by the time you remove your lens, the next thing you're supposed to see is the shutter blade. If you use a mirrorless, if you use a DSLR, you will see the inverted mirror. When you raise the mirror, you see the shutter blade. When the shutter blade goes up, you will see the sensor. The sensor is what does the recording of your data, of your information. All right. So now let's go on. Like I said, the shutter speed does action, cuts. So what it means is that the time that the shutter speed says action, the sensor is going to be active and record whatever is going on, and then the shutter speed is going to say cut, and then it will stop recording. All the data it has recorded within that time is going to combine it and make it into one image. So what that means is that if you open the shutter speed to be slow, if somebody is moving, by the time you are done with your exposure, what happens is that the final image is going to have like somebody appearing several times. That's because you had a very slow shutter speed. But if you want a situation where you want the image to be sharp, that even if the person is moving, you want to catch the person just right in the action, you need a fast shutter speed. When your shutter speed is fast, even if the person is moving, you can freeze just a moment out of the picture, and then you have a sharp image. But when you have a slow shutter speed, all right, when you have a slow shutter speed, it is going to make your subject appear multiple times in your image. That's how the shutter speed, works. But then, how does it not control the exposure? Shutter speed, for example, if you leave the shutter speed on, like I told you, the sensor records information. All right, it's just like Stop. Stop. It's just like, oh my God. Guys, just, I don't know what to do. What do you want?
He wants to be in the class now.
You want to teach? We are teach now. What do you know? Yeah, come and take bread. What do you need? All right, so let's go on. So now, like I said, the shutter speed. Now, how does it affect the exposure? Because your sensor is recording data and it will combine it. Just let's take, for example, I tell you, oh yeah, put water into this drum. Then I give you 10 seconds and then I give you 1 minute. You see that if I give you longer time, you will fetch more water than if I give you shorter time. That's what happens when you are dealing with shorter speed. When you have a fast shorter speed, it will not record enough light. So at the end of the day, your image will become underexposed, will become dark. But if you give your camera a longer time, it will record enough light and your image will be more exposed. But I told you, if you leave it for very long, you're going to have your image appearing several times if they are moving in the shot. And if your hand shakes when you're shooting, you're also going to have that shake showing in your picture. So when it comes to shooting in church, you don't want to go to a very slow shutter speed. You want to be in an average where you are not too slow, you are not too fast, so that you can be able to, because if you are too fast, the lights, the decoration lights will not show in your picture. And if you are too slow, people will be appearing multiple times. So you have to be on an average where it is not too fast, it is not too slow. Shutter speed is recorded in time. So we have 1/200 of a second, 1/1000 of a second. You have 1 second, 30 seconds, and as the case may be. That's how shutter speed works. Take. All right. Then the other thing, which is the fourth thing that controls exposure, is what we call the ISO. The ISO is the camera sensitivity to light. If the ISO is high, your image will be more exposed. If the ISO is low, your image will be less exposed. So if you want a brighter image, you increase your ISO. But the ISO, what happens is that the ISO is the ISO is just like the way you have brightness. What do you want? It's just like the way you have brightness in your photo editing app. If you increase the brightness, so the light is not coming from, it's just camera. It's just like the computer that's trying to imitate exposure and just increase it. All right. So if you are playing with the ISO, if you go to a very high number, the camera is going to start introducing noise, because it is not getting light. It is trying to imitate how it's supposed to be if there was more light. And at the end of the day, it's going to add noise. So you need to make sure that your ISO is not too high, it's not too low. All right. So for modern cameras, modern cameras that are made maybe 2020, 2021, most of the mirrorless camera, you can do as much as 3200 ISO and you still have very, very clean image. All right. But also note that the ISO is not working alone. You are working with all other factors. So if one changes, the other three will also need to change in a way. Maybe not all, maybe one or two of them will need to change in order for you to affect your exposure. I don't know what this guy wants. Grandma is calling. Grandma is calling. Oh my God. Okay, so because I've not gone anywhere now with this. Okay? Let's see if we can do much. Okay, so now, like I've said, the four things that control exposure: your light, your aperture, the shorter speed your ISO. Now your lights, there are two lights. Number one, the lights you bring in as a photographer, and then number two, the available lights. All right. So most times, if you're using very modern cameras, you can shoot with the available light and you still have very good shots. All right. But if you want to make it more unique, more sharp, and you, of course, brighter and all that, you can introduce your own lights, and your light can be either continuous or flashlight. For the most part of it, a lot of people use flashlights. All right, if you're going to use flashlights, don't ever point your flashlight. Okay, let's assume this is your flashlight on top of your camera. Don't ever point your flashlight to your subject. All right, if you point it to your subject, you're going to cast shadow behind them, and you are going to potentially affect the eyes of your subject. You don't want that. All right, you're supposed to always look for an area that can make your flashlight become bigger. For example, if you have a white ceiling, all right, or you could, there's something that's, there's something called a placard that normally comes with most of the flashes, that you can pull it up and then angle your flash towards your subject a bit, not directly, just to an angle, and that can also help put light on your subject's face if you want that. Okay, but for the most part, a lot of people shoot, they put the light against the roof and it shines bright on your subject. Okay, so that can work. Then some people can also shoot what we call off-camera flash. So what it means is that the flash is not on top of your camera, you just put it on a light stand, maybe facing the roof, or put a softbox facing your subject. They just do it somehow just to make sure that you're able to put light on the subject. So that's also a way that can be done. And then what else again? Yes, so that's that for factors that controls exposure. So now let's talk about gears quickly. All right, so now we have two things that makes up your camera. We have the camera body and we have the lens. The camera body is the brain, while the lens is the eye, and both of them are very important. So you want to make sure you have a very good body, a very good camera body, because the body is going to determine whether your image will be well processed, because it's going to process your image. Okay, if you have a good body, all right, it's going to make you be able to manage low light situation, and it's going to make you produce decent images. The same thing, the way the eyes work, the eyes is the lens. The lens determines whether your image will be sharp. It determines whether your image colors are going to come out well. If they will not come out well, the lens will determine. So you need quality lens. All right, and it's also going to help you to manage low light situation. Okay, so now there are different camera bodies in the market. All right, when you go to the market and you want to buy a camera worth 1 million naira, you will see. You want to buy a camera worth 5 million, you will see. Just a camera. You want to buy a camera worth 10 million, you will see. You want to buy a camera worth 100 million, you will see. All right, but now what will make you choose a camera over another camera? There are many factors depending on, first, your budget. What do you have available? All right, then the next thing is we need to look for what is the best we can get for that your budget. And for me, I always recommend going for a full frame camera over a crop sensor or a micro four third, because you are dealing with a church environment, which most times, you are going to be shooting a lot of wide angles. You don't want a situation where you want to shoot a group photograph, you have to enter bike and go back because you want to shoot a group photograph. You want to be able to stand at a reasonable distance and be able to cover a lot of people, even with a wide angle lens. All right, there are some people that shoot micro four third. You shoot micro four third like the Panasonic GH5, GH4, and then you put a lens like 20 mm. You will still need to go back. But somebody that is shooting a full frame camera with 20 mm will stand and you're able to cover more area compared to somebody shooting micro four third or even a crop sensor. Okay, because the further you go from your subject, the more difficult for you to be able to communicate, because there are other things that can intrude into your shots, and at the end of the day you might not get the best. So you have to make sure you get at least, if you can get a full frame, or if you're go for a crop sensor, but I don't recommend micro four third at all. Then another thing is the lens. The lens, if you are just starting out and you are using a full frame, buy a 50 mm lens. That's the starter pack. Don't ever buy don't ever recommend to your church to buy camera with the kit lens. The kit lens is useless. the kit lens is not useful except you don't know what you are doing. If you know what you are doing, you know that you don't need the kit lens. So don't ever I don't ever buy camera with kit lens, except the kit lens that is coming with the camera is a kit lens that has a fixed focal length. That sorry, a fixed aperture. That's the story for another day, because I will have to explain a lot to get into that. So buy a 50 mm. If you are using a crop sensor, buy a 35 mm for a start. But now another thing you need a wide angle lens to be able to shoot wide. You need a portrait lens to be able to shoot portrait from a long distance, like a 70 to 200. But those are very expensive lenses, but you can graduate into them as time goes on. But if you're just starting, you need one lens. You can buy a 50 mm for a full frame or a 35 mm for a crop sensor lens. All right, so let's see. Let me see if there's any other thing I've not talked about. All right, so the next thing is okay, so yeah, I'm almost done. So the next thing is composition theorems and tips. So there are many composition theorems. Like you just go online, you see we have what we call frame in a frame. We have rule of third. We have symmetry, rule of odd. We have leading lines. We have, filling the frame and all of that. There are a lot of composition theorem. And in all this, all right, if you really, really want to, if you really want to become a professional in taking good pictures, you need to make sure you prepare. You need to prepare in terms of, having shots that you want to take ahead of time. Don't wait until you are in that situation. I want to look for it. There's a photographer I want to check his work and show you guys. You can check him online, Professor Hines. Just give me a minute. I want to show you some of his old pictures. Then, although he doesn't shoot a lot of church events anymore like that, but I still admire some of his old pictures. Let me see, where is it? Let me see, portfolio collection. Let me see if I can quickly pull out some pictures just to show some of the things I'm talking about. Give me a minute. Professor Ernst. Worship. All right, so let me just quickly share my screen for a minute just to illustrate some of the things I'm talking about. All right, so let me share. Allow. Okay, let me do a window. Which window? Chrome tab. All right, so can you guys see my screen? Please thumbs up if you can see the screen. Thumbs up. All right, good. All right, good. So this was like 2018. Professor Hines is more of like a street photographer. He's very, very good. Very, very good. So, but he has some old collections he did about worship, like in church. Different image. So this sound engineer, in church. So you can just go. I think I will drop this link with Chukuma, so that it would share with you guys. The thing is not loading up. Okay, so you can just go through. So what you need is that when you see pictures like this, you'll be able to have an idea of something you can take in church. So look at this kind of angle. Look at the way the picture is. These are things I'm talking about, that you are training your eyes, training yourself ahead before you take your pictures. Let me see Look at, but these are old images. It takes even way better shots now, but these images are still very, very iconic. Look at this.
So we can't see your screen now.
You cannot see it.
Yes, sir.
I
Okay,
can
we can
see
see
it.
now.
Ah, so oh, this boy wants to sleep. Okay, so I'm going to drop the link with Chukuma so you guys can, you guys can go through. Professor Eyes is on Instagram, and he has a website. You can check his work, but he doesn't have a lot of short work right now. But he used to have a lot of them. You can just check those collection I've shown you. All right. So I will send the link. Chukuma will send it to you guys. Okay. Let me. Okay, I've sent it to Chukuma. So let me take questions if you have any, because any other thing I've not talked about today, I'm going to put it in my class next week, okay? Because this boy did not allow me concentrate and time is already gone. So I don't know if you have any question. Please go ahead. You can mute yourself and ask a question. So permit me to turn off the screen. So we just will continue like this for the questions. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Ask a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Thomas Ware from Liberia. And you spoke about two things concerning the camera. You spoke about the aperture and then you also spoke about the ISO. Yes, so my question has to do with whether whether it's applicable when it comes to phone, because through your conversation you've been talking about camera, so I want to know that whether it's applicable to phone camera too. Like for us that into the media area, but then we are using phone, for photograph now, and we are not really using camera, main camera. So I want to know that.
Okay, so if you're using a phone, it means that you are not shooting, you're not the one controlling those settings I'm talking about. All right, because in your phone has these things. It has aperture, has ISO, has shutter speed, but then the aperture is fixed. The aperture is already there. The focal length is already there. The ISO is something that changes, that the camera cannot change. That when you tap on the screen, you can lift your finger up, slide it up or slide it down to increase or decrease the exposure of the image. But then you have very little control compared to when you are dealing with a camera. So if you are using a phone, you need to depend on the first factor, which is light. It is very important, because in a low light situation, a phone will not perform well, because the sensor of a phone is very small, very tiny, very tiny. When you put the sensor of a phone against the sensor of a camera, they are not mates, they are not anywhere close. It's just like David and Goliath, they are not anywhere close. Why? Because the sensor of a camera is bigger. Because of that, it can record more data and it can give you a better exposure compared to a phone. So if you are using a phone, you will not heavily depend on lights. So you need to add more light, introduce light. So if you are dealing with a phone, you cannot use flashlight. You have to now use maybe continuous lights. There are some lights you can just carry along that you can just be able to use. But then when you're bringing all those lights, most times you can actually distract some people who are worshiping. So except you are not shooting in a dark environment, maybe there's a lot of light in the hall, then you can manage the phone. But the ultimate goal is you guys should make plans to get a professional camera to give you better results.
Hello, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, any other question, please go ahead.
Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I wanted to add on the topic of phones. Nowadays, phones, especially the new produced, the photography kit phones, they come out with I would say that are large. They have increased sensors and all, and they have a pro mode where you can fix the settings, you can change the ISO, you can change the how your lenses coordinate and how your pictures will look like. So maybe those settings also, how can somebody fix those settings to look more professional?
All right. So the thing is, I know there are some camera apps you can use. They will tell you you're controlling aperture, you're controlling shutter speed. See, the truth is that they are just giving you something that affects the exposure. It is not working in the real sense. It is just something that mimics it. Because shorter blade, for example, shorter speed, shorter blade, aperture, those things are physical components of your camera. They are not, they have mechanical parts, they move. Aperture blade is not something that that you mimic. It's something that the blade opens or reduces. It's not present in your phone. Your phone has a fixed aperture. Shorter blade is not present in your phone. Okay, but to an extent, let's say yes, it can work because shorter blade, what it does is to cue in the sensor to say, okay, start recording, stop recording. You can have that, you can have ISO, but for aperture, it's not possible. But there might be some apps that have something that looks like it, that you can control it. You say it's working, but it is not working the way it's supposed to work in a camera. But yes, you can use that. I'm not a professional mobile phone photographer, so I'm not in tune with the modern updates on that. I do more with professional cameras, so I can only guide on that aspect. So maybe somebody that does more of mobile phone photography, I can shoot with mobile phone and I will get good results, but I cannot teach it because I don't do it all the time. I do more with professional cameras. I hope you guys understand. So that's why I I recommended that you guys should instead work towards getting a professional camera. Yes, next question.
Yeah, actually, it's not question, but I just want to recommend at least that you can drop some of those cameras. If you can drop it, like we can see them, the one that you're talking about that have the lens that so that we can observe them in terms of when we get in camera to know which one that we're supposed to get. So you can please do that for us.
So, like I was saying in my presentation, that there are so many options, like so many, just like when you want to buy a phone today, so many options. There are so many options. So most times it falls under budget and based on camera brand, based on people's choices. But then the one I've used personally, I've used more of Nikon and Sony brands. So I've used the Nikon D71, which is very good camera. I've used the Nikon D610, a good camera as well. I've used the Nikon D750, a good camera. Then the mirrorless, I've used the Nikon Z5, it's a good camera. Then I've used the Sony A73, which is also a good camera. So those are the cameras that I have as my own personal camera in my camera bag. Okay. But then I've had experience with so many other cameras, but those are my own personal cameras. So if you want to get any of those ones, can do fine. If you're a Canon user, the Canon 6D Mark II, they're very decent camera. All right. You can get that, or you can get the Canon Arrow, EOS Arrow, or the Arrow 6, Arrow 5. They're also very, very decent camera. Then if you deal with which one is it, Pentas or Lumix? But for me, I either do Nikon or Sony. All right, those are my favorite, choice of brand to work with. So, is there any other question?
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir. Um, my
Good evening,
question is, if
Daniel
you're in,
Lemoa. Do you have a sister called Chinwe?
yes, sir, my elder sister.
Oh, okay. Did she finish from Uniben?
Yes, sir, she has told me about you.
Okay, because I saw your surname, I just know that I've seen this name somewhere. All right, no problem. I'm I'm listening. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. My question is, if you're in a dark area with a professional DC camera, how will you set it? Like during the time I went through photography, they're talking about something like you increase ISO and the reduce aperture, something like that. But I didn't really get it like that.
Okay, so now let's assume I'm in a I'm in a church and then I want to take a picture. All right. First of all, note that if you face the altar and you face the congregation, you're not going to get the same exposure. Why? because of light. Most times they put a lot of light on the stage and few light in the environment. So at the end of the day, you have better exposure or a brighter exposure when you're facing the pulpit, and you have less exposure when you're facing the congregation. That's to show you that light is affecting your exposure. Then number two, the aperture. The aperture, I told you, is dependent on the lens. Okay, if you're going to shoot one subject, it's good you can open your aperture to the widest. But if you are shooting a group photograph, I told you, don't shoot wide aperture. But if you are shooting a group, but your focus is one person, just like you see that, you see, if you go to that pictures from Professor Hines that I was showing you, he shot some pictures that it was as if it's group, but you know the picture focused on one or two persons and other people were blur. That is something that you achieve with a wide aperture as well. Okay, so that's what when you increase, when you make your aperture wider by reducing the f-stop to maybe a smaller f-stop, you will still see whether the image is well exposed or not. So if the image is not exposed enough, you cannot increase your ISO. So the one I think you should not play with is the shutter speed, because the shutter speed is very, very sensitive. You don't want a situation where you have image that somebody's appearing multiple times. So I like to keep the shutter speed between 1/80 to 1/200, between that when I'm shooting indoor. When I'm shooting outdoor, I can increase it if it is daytime. All right, I can increase it to 1/4000, 1/8000, as the case may be. But when I'm shooting indoor, I don't go below 1/80. All right. But then the ISO can go up as high as 2500, as high as 3000, when you're talking about the ISO. And then the aperture, I use that based on what am I trying to photograph. Do I want the background to be blur? Do I want to single out somebody, or do I want to take a group photograph where I want everybody to be sharp? That's what will determine the aperture I use. I hope it's on that aspect. Any, please, if you have a question, go ahead, please. If you have a question, go ahead. Any question? Okay, so if there are no other questions, so I think that'll be all from my end today. So the next class, we'll have maybe I will be able to show you editing on the phone, editing on editing on on the phone, and also with my PC. So let's see how that will be. So thank you, Impact Media Academy, for having me, and thank you guys. I hope you have a good one. Good night, everyone. God bless you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.